Bonjour, Odeo Gichida Indigenous Cause. My name is Heart Warrior, and I'm going to share a letter with you that I wrote to the U.S. Border Security Council. Attention, Sean Ferry Tour at Reston, Virginia. Anyway, I already mailed this letter off to him, but I wanted to share it with you. Dear Sir, as a grandmother raising 3 grandchildren on a limited budget, I send what is possible to support your efforts at the border and believe it is urgent that we have a wall and plenty of Border Patrol agents all along the wall. And ICE. The sovereignty of the United States government and the well-being of the United States citizens is at stake and must come first. We have a homeless population all over the country, much due to illegal drugs on the street coming in across the border, and big runaway pharma drugs due to greed. It is rotting U.S. culture. Crime is rampant, and child trafficking, and women disappearing off the streets. These crime rings must be stopped, many at the border. And right here, it's been all over Indian country, the disappearing Native women. Recently, this is a break out of the letter. Last winter, Minneapolis busted a big crime ring in which they were trafficking women from Taiwan who didn't speak English, didn't know the culture. So it makes it much more difficult for them to run away. And I suspect that our Native women have been taken to a foreign country where they don't speak the language, and it will be difficult for them to get away, which is really sad when you think about what these women must be going through. Also, illegal arms come across the border, people from countries from all over the world, many of whom are sworn enemies to the United States. Also, criminals from Mexico and South America invade the land and must be stopped. As a North American Indian, the first people and race of the North America who were a sympathetic and generous people with open borders, well, we see what happened to them, don't we? As North American Indians, we all have treaties with the sovereign United States government. It's a sovereign government that we have these treaties with. We do not want our treaties to go the way of the Macedon, along with the U.S. if globalist-funded illegal aliens and crime destroy the sovereignty of the United States, creating another free-for-all. It's hard to believe such socialist, anti-American, so-called Democrats are allowed to get away with so much destructive behavior in Congress. It's a total embarrassment, and I just added that. It's a total embarrassment to this country, how they're acting. They are blocking proper procedure at the border and elsewhere. You can count on our support. Furthermore, and most important, I thank all of the southern border, all of you workers at the southern border who are jeopardizing your well-being and life to protect the border, even if you are understaffed and underfunded. I think citizens who have spent their own time, work hours, and finances to ensure walls are put up at strategic locations. So I thank them very much for their work. Be informed that many citizens know what you are doing and are greatly appreciative. Citizens are reaching a high level of concern as we find out the full impact of what's going on and how the Democrat Socialists in Congress, with the help of lying mainstream media, both with funding of globalist powermongers, seek to overthrow the sovereignty of the United States and the United States Constitution, to take the freedom of United States citizen and subvert North American Indian treaties and crush us, as Venezuela has been. This will not stand. It's time for a house cleaning, and anti-American socialist Democrats were swept out of Congress. Yours in unity, Grandmother Heart Warrior Chosa, descendant of 2 chiefs who signed the 1854 treaty for the Lake Superior bands of Anishinaabe. Ojibwe Nation, United States citizen. And I would like to add that when the runaway serfs, and they were running away from an aristocracy, from kings that thought of serfs as not human, and that they could do anything they wanted to them. Now, when I think of one little town up in northern Minnesota and you look back at their history, they became a town in 1888. They were declared a town. 1888. Not that long ago, actually. So when they came, the Sylvanians settled the town, and they were brought here in chains. They were mining slaves. The king brought them to mine whatever they could find. And so the carts were allowed to be dented, but the men could die at work and nobody cared. But if they harmed one of the carts, then, or one of the donkeys, then they caught holy hell. Not only that, but the cousin Jack, who ran the mine, was able to go into the miners' home anytime they felt like it and rape their wives. They were abused, they were mistreated, and they were slaves. So they came here as slaves for the king back in the old country. And then around them, settled in the township around the town, was a different county. And those were all Finns that were escaping the losing side of a revolution. So amongst them you had every strata of society that had been on that side. And they became the loggers. The town, the Sylvanians, became the miners. And it was the Wild West. For the Indians in the area, of which my family was one, it became the Wild West. But this town was unusual in a lot of ways, but I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm just saying that this is what it was like, and one of the things that I'd wanted to share about that is that the people, the women, the first women in were prostitutes that serviced the loggers and the miners, and they had whorehouses at the town. You can look at some of the buildings and say, oh, that used to be the Last Chance, or this used to be whatever. And those were the first women. The founding mothers of the United States were servicing men. And then, once the miner built up his income and was able to afford a home, then he got into a catalog and sent away for a mail order bride. And these were proper women, properly behaved women that expected to be married and raise a family. So then those women came in. And when those women came in, the town, when they had the 4th of July parade, everybody got up at 6 a.m. and fired off their guns. And then the day's festivities began, and they had things going on all the way. Who could climb a greased pole the fastest? Who could cut down and chop up a tree the fastest? It was races of all different kinds that you can imagine between loggers and miners. And then there were canoe races and foot races. And in the canoe races, there was the squaw foot race, the squaw canoe race. The native women joined in. And when they had a parade, it was divided in 3 sections. The first section might be Sylvanian, and they'd be in their traditional dress. And the second part of the parade might be the Finns, and they'd be in their traditional dress. And the third part of the parade were Native Indians, and they'd be in their traditional dress. So everybody took part in this parade, and this was part of the 4th of July. And then their last event of the day was the Firemen's Ball, of which the women that were brought in, mail order brides, and they could show off their beautiful dresses, and they would have a ball. But these women noticed the freedom of Native women, how Native women could join in the foot races and the canoe races and participate. And so by it was getting to be the 1920s, and it came out in the newspaper, the City Fathers, the women's vote came up. And the City Fathers put an article in the newspaper that said, oh, our women are too much of ladies to want to vote. And here by the next paper, it said them ladies came out in droves. They threw away their bustles, and they formed the Ladies Snowshoe Club. So the freedom of Native women impacted what white women did. And the white women couldn't participate because they wore those big metal cages under their dresses, And so you couldn't even really sit very comfortably in those, or let alone participate in racing and canoeing. So they saw the freedom of Native women and they wanted that. And so they threw away those bustles and they formed the Ladies Snowshoe Club, and they came out in droves to vote. Okay, that was one way. Now another way I'm going to tell you about is when these slaves beached up on Turtle Island, which is what we call the North American continent. They had been used to having all decisions in the running of society done by the aristocracy, and they were being taxed to death by the aristocracy. And so when Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin visited the Indians, and they saw the Iroquois Nation in particular, saw their councils, saw their government, and saw how they governed themselves, they turned to each other and said, why can't we do that? Why can't we be free of the aristocracy and govern ourselves? We can, if savages can do this, we can do it. And so that's when they formed their own government. They broke away from King George. They founded their own government and the Constitution of the United States. And a lot of the high-mindedness of this came on from the native culture. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. Besides that, besides Biden, I'm going to add a little bit to the Biden story, extorting Ukraine, holding their $8 billion loan above their head and saying, you're not going to get it from the United States if you investigate my son in the business dealings that he belongs to. If you don't drop that investigation, you're not getting the money. So he more or less blackmailed them. And not only that, but it's come out that his bumbling Biden has extorted Ukraine and China by making billions of dollars for Hunter Biden with the Chinese. So by putting him on a Chinese funding committee and extorting billions of dollars, paying him billions of dollars, and telling the Chinese they could make their money back on trade deals with the U.S. And so this is why China is dragging its feet with President Trump trying to make a better deal for United States citizens. So what they did is they extorted China, and citizens are paying the bill, are footing the bill by taking it up the poop chute over the business dealings with trade. And so Trump is putting a stop to this, but in order to do that, we have to have the full story of what Biden did. And so he's as corrupt as hell, and you don't want him for president, that's for sure. Okay, another thing about Trump that the mainstream media never covers all the good things that he does. And he's done, as far as I know, made 50 new things, but this is just a few of those. Okay, first of all, everybody knows that he eliminated the death tax, because when a couple would die, and if they had land holdings or a business that they wanted to hand down to their children, they couldn't do it because the tax was so high, the death tax, that it wasn't worth handing down. So he eliminated the death tax. He also passed a law that pharmacies have to tell their customers who is giving the best deal on a certain medicine. Before that, it was illegal for them to help their customers in that way. He's done away with that, so now pharmacies are free to share with their customers what the best financial deal is on these medicines. And he continues to get rid of mounds and mounds of red tape. Why, I remember early on in his presidency where he was shown sitting at the Oval Office with stacks and stacks and stacks of useless red tape that was plugging up the smooth operations of business and for the people and the government. So and that's just a few things that he's done. He's done many, many things. So I just wanted to share all that with you for today. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll be back.